I interviewed my dad for the Historic Event Perspective Project audio recording. Can you please identify two specific events that you associate with World War II?
The first of those would be the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. And that's because my grandfather, Gramps we called him, was the commander of the Naval Air Station that was on Ford Island in the middle of Pearl Harbor, surrounded by all the battleships that were targeted by the Japanese. And my father and grandmother and my uncle and aunt were all in the house that morning at 7 o'clock when the bombing started, and had to run to air raid shelters while Japanese Zeros were strafing them. And so it was a hugely significant event in my family history as well as world history that my family had a front row seat to. And then the second one would be the Holocaust and the revelations about just how incredibly awful and inhumane it was. And for me, it's a loss of innocence for me and the world, because it was inconceivable that human beings could treat other human beings that way until we saw the evidence once we started liberating those concentration camps.
Two events associated with the Vietnam War.
Yes, Vietnam, let's see. I was alive, I was very young. We used to watch the news about the war on TV while we were eating dinner in the den, eating our TV dinners. And I think one of the things that stands out most for me was that it was really the first war where the citizens of the United States questioned and rejected the propaganda coming from our government and the authorities that previously we had complete faith in. Mm-hmm. And so that was the beginning of, we're seeing this now play out with questioning authority and lack of faith and trust in our government. And then the second thing would be, well, the realization that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a total fabrication. It never happened, and it was a lie, which became the pretext for going to war, which led to the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Vietnamese. And again, that was another sort of crumbling of once it was discovered that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a total fabrication and a lie, it was more erosion in our confidence and faith in our authority figures and in our government.
And then two events associated with the Twin Towers attack.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out. Well, I was watching it. I watched it live on TV, and not the first one, because nobody anticipated the first one, but once word started getting out, I turned on the TV and was watching the first building catch on fire and then watched the second one get hit. And then it was very clear that it wasn't an accident, it was a terrorist attack. And so that was a hugely significant revelation or moment when it was no longer a question about, did this plane go off course accidentally, was there some mistake. When another one happened back to back with it, it was very clear we're under attack. And having never, other than the War of 1812 when the British attacked, we'd never been under attack in this country.
Quick clarification, he meant never under attack on the mainland of this country.
And so it was a very, it felt like a very vulnerable moment in our U.S. history, where all of a sudden that our enemies could reach us.
Right.
And then the second thing that I recall was how George Bush, who I wasn't a fan of, he did a good job of going down to ground zero and, getting America to like have some resilience and some fortitude. But then over time, it turned out that George Bush's EPA had been withholding data about how toxic the air and the environment was around ground zero, that all of those rescuers and firemen that ran down there and then were sifting through the rubble for weeks and weeks and weeks were exposed to, and many of them ended up dying because they weren't provided with true information about how toxic that was, and that they could have then taken measures to protect themselves. Uplifting, huh?
Right. Based on your schooling or memory or both, please describe what you feel is worth understanding or significant about each of these three major events. We'll start with World War II.
Well, in my own history, my family, my grandfather was the commander of an aircraft carrier. After Pearl Harbor, he was promoted to commander of an aircraft carrier in the Pacific, and went on to an illustrious career, battling the Japanese Empire, and we were the good guys. We were the very clear good guys in World War II, and we came to the rescue as a nation, and we saved Europe, and we wiped out the Japanese, and prevented their empire from taking over the Pacific and probably the Western Americas. And so that's what I grew up with, is America was a hero. And then we went to Vietnam, and all of that kind of came crumbling down. And we weren't a hero. We were there with conflicted reasons. Some of it weren't true, with no real clear purpose and meaning and goal for the war. And all of a sudden, we're no longer a hero. We're meddling in foreign countries' private internal affairs based on lies, and people were getting killed. And so that was kind of the arc of history that I grew up through. And then the Twin Towers, I already talked about this a little bit, about that sense of vulnerability, that our homeland got attacked for the very significantly for the first time. But then over time, you come to realize that as more and more information trickled out, this attack was not that. Many of the people in the security agencies weren't that surprised by this. They had lots of warnings about it. And in fact, we created the Mujahideen that fought Russia, and then once they kicked Russia out, they turned on the United States, because we were the other first world power that was kind of oppressing the folks in Afghanistan. And so, it was kind of a creation of our own foreign meddling, and it turned around and bit us on the nose.
What moment in history do you most remember, and why? It can be anything. It doesn't have to be related to the wars.
Well, there's so many. The civil rights movement was huge. And the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, the Cold War, and then the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, which sort of ended the Cold War, and and then our invasions into those countries in the Middle East. But what I think back on is, I was in summer camp in 1968, 9, I think it was 8, and during lunch, they had a special announcement, and they rolled a TV into the dining hall, and we watched Americans land on the moon and then walk on the moon for the first time, and which was just a stunning feat to imagine that we escaped the bounds of Earth and using our technological expertise and our spirit to do this. And it was sort of unbelievable at the time, and it opened up this the optimism about this great space age that we're getting ready to enter into, and that our technological prowess is going to save the day. Didn't actually turn out that way.
Right.
but life goes on.